morning sun cast a warm glow over the parking lot of Riverside Grocery as 72-year-old James Washington pulled his old Honda into a spot near the entrance. It was a Tuesday just after 9 in the morning, and the store had that peaceful quiet that comes right after the early rush but before the lunch crowd arrives. James had been coming to this same grocery store every week for the past 15 years. Ever since he retired from the Postal Service, his Tuesday morning shopping trips had become something of a ritual. He knew the layout by heart, recognized most of the staff by name, and they recognized him too. The young cashier, Miguel, would always ask about his grandchildren. The produce manager, an older gentleman named Robert, would tip him off about which melons were the sweetest that week. As James grabbed a shopping cart from the corral outside, he nodded to a couple of other regular shoppers he'd seen over the years. Small-town life had its perks. There was comfort in familiarity, in being part of a community where people knew each other, at least by sight. The automatic doors whooshed open, and James felt the cool air conditioning wash over him. He pulled out his shopping list, written in his neat, careful handwriting on the back of an old envelope. His wife, Dorothy, had been making these lists for 50 years of their marriage, but since her passing 2 years ago, the job had fallen to him. He'd kept her system, though, organizing items by aisle to make the trip more efficient. First stop, produce. James made his way past the flower display near the entrance, their sweet fragrance reminding him to pick up some fresh carnations for Dorothy's grave on his way home. The produce section was bathed in bright light, making the fruits and vegetables look vibrant and appealing. He selected tomatoes carefully, giving each one a gentle squeeze the way Dorothy had taught him. Not too soft, not too hard. 3 Roma tomatoes went into a plastic bag. Next came the lettuce. James preferred the crisp romaine over the iceberg, though it cost a bit more. At his age, he figured he'd earned the right to buy what he actually enjoyed. He added a bunch of bananas, checking to make sure they were still slightly green. They'd ripened perfectly by midweek. A young mother passed by with a toddler in her cart, and James smiled at the little girl. She giggled and waved her tiny hand at him. These small moments, these simple human connections, they made the day brighter. James had been shopping for about 20 minutes, his cart now holding produce, a carton of milk, some chicken breasts, and a loaf of whole wheat bread. He was comparing prices on canned soups, reading the labels through his reading glasses, when he heard a commotion near the front of the store. A woman's voice, loud and sharp, cut through the peaceful atmosphere. James glanced up briefly, saw a blonde woman in her 40s gesturing wildly at the customer service desk, then returned his attention to the soup cans. He'd been around long enough to know that sometimes people just had bad days. The staff would handle it. He selected 3 cans of chicken noodle soup and placed them in his cart. His grandson, Timothy, was coming to visit this weekend, and the boy had loved this particular soup since he was small. James smiled at the memory of Timothy at age 5, slurping soup and getting noodles all over his face. The commotion at the front seemed to have settled down. James continued through his list, methodical and unhurried. There was no rush. He had nowhere else to be, and he actually enjoyed this time. It got him out of the empty house, gave structure to his day. In the cereal aisle, he ran into Mrs. Patterson, a widow from his church. They chatted briefly about the upcoming Sunday service and the potluck being planned for next month. She mentioned that her arthritis was acting up with the weather change, and James sympathized. His knees weren't what they used to be either. After parting ways with Mrs. Patterson, James headed toward the dairy section. He needed eggs, some cheese, and yogurt. The store had rearranged this section recently, and it took him a moment to locate the Greek yogurt Dorothy used to like. He still bought it, still ate it for breakfast, finding comfort in maintaining their old routines. As he placed a container of yogurt in his cart, James noticed the same blonde woman from earlier entering the dairy section from the opposite end. She was on her phone, her voice carrying across the refrigerated cases. She seemed angry about something, though James couldn't make out the exact words. Her face was flushed, and she was walking quickly, jerking her cart around the corner with unnecessary force. James had learned over 7 decades that some people carried storms inside them. Best to stay out of their way and let them pass. He moved toward the egg section, taking his time to select a carton and check each egg for cracks. You could never be too careful. The woman's voice grew louder. She was off the phone now, but seemed to be muttering to herself, pulling items off shelves with aggressive motions. Another shopper, a young man in his 20s, gave her a wide berth, sensing the negativity radiating from her. James found himself at the end of the dairy aisle with a nearly full cart. He glanced at his list. Just a few more items, coffee, some pasta, and he'd be done. He could check out and be home before lunch, maybe work in his garden for a bit if the weather held. He turned his cart toward the coffee aisle, and that's when he felt it, a sudden jarring impact from behind. His cart lurched forward and he stumbled slightly, catching himself on the handle. "Excuse me," a sharp voice said behind him. "That's my cart." James turned around, confused. The blonde woman was standing there, her face twisted in anger, pointing at his cart. His cart, the one he'd been pushing around for the past 20 minutes. The one clearly filled with his groceries. "I'm sorry," James said politely, thinking there must be some misunderstanding. "This is my cart. I've been shopping with it since I came in." "No," the woman insisted, her voice rising. "That's my cart. I left it right here and you took it." James looked around. There was another empty cart sitting abandoned near the yogurt display, but it was clearly empty. His cart was full of groceries he'd carefully selected. Anyone could see that. "Ma'am, I think you're mistaken," James said calmly, his postal service training in dealing with difficult customers kicking in. "Stay calm, stay polite. I've had this cart for 20 minutes. These are my groceries." Other shoppers were beginning to notice the exchange. A teenage stock clerk stacking milk cartons nearby paused and watched nervously. The woman's face grew redder. "Are you calling me a liar?" Her voice echoed off the refrigerated cases. "I want my cart back right now." James felt his heart rate pick up slightly, but he kept his voice steady and calm. "These are my groceries, ma'am. I selected them myself. Perhaps you left your cart somewhere else." What happened next would change an ordinary Tuesday morning into something James Washington would never forget. The woman stepped closer, and the look in her eyes was one James had seen before too many times in his 72 years. It was a look that told him this wasn't really about a shopping cart at all. The woman took another step closer to James, invading his personal space in a way that made him instinctively take a small step back. Her finger was now pointing directly at his chest, and her voice had taken on a tone that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. "I know exactly what you people do," she said, her words dripping with contempt. "You think you can just take whatever you want? Well, not in my town." James felt his stomach tighten. In all his years, he'd developed a sixth sense for these moments. The way she emphasized "you people" left no doubt about what she really meant. He glanced around, hoping someone might intervene, but the other shoppers seemed frozen, uncertain about what to do. "Ma'am, I don't want any trouble," James said, his voice still calm but firm. "These are my groceries. I've been shopping here for 15 years. If you need a cart, there's an empty one right over there." He gestured toward the abandoned cart near the yogurt section, but the woman didn't even look. Her eyes were fixed on him with an intensity that felt almost unhinged. "Don't you dare tell me what to do," she shrieked. "I saw you take my cart. Give it back right now or I'm calling the police." The teenage stock clerk, a kid who couldn't have been more than 17, finally found his voice. "Ma'am, maybe we should get a manager to help sort this out." The woman whirled on him. "Stay out of this. This is between me and this thief." James felt a flash of anger at being called a thief, but he swallowed it down. Getting angry would only make things worse. He'd learned that lesson a long time ago. "I'm not a thief. I've done nothing wrong. I'm just trying to do my shopping and go home." By now, several other shoppers had stopped to watch. James could see phones being pulled out of pockets. In today's world, everything got recorded. Part of him was grateful for that. At least there would be proof of what was really happening. A middle-aged woman with 2 kids pushed her cart closer. "Excuse me," she said to the angry woman, "but I saw this gentleman when I came in. He's been shopping with that cart the whole time." "I think you're confused." James felt a small surge of gratitude toward the stranger willing to speak up, but the angry woman turned on her too. "Nobody asked you." "Mind your own business." The woman with the kids quickly moved away, pulling her children closer. James saw the fear in those kids' eyes and it made his heart ache. They shouldn't have to witness this kind of ugliness. "Look," James tried again. "Why don't we just let the manager sort this out? I'm sure there's been a simple misunderstanding." "There's no misunderstanding." The woman's voice had reached a pitch that echoed throughout the dairy section. "You people come into our stores, into our neighborhoods, and think you can do whatever you want. Well, I'm sick of it. I'm sick of all of you." The words hung in the air like poison. There was no mistaking her meaning now. No room for interpretation. James felt something inside him crack just a little. 72 years of moments like this, big and small, and they still had the power to hurt. "Ma'am, that's enough," James said, his voice harder now. "I'm going to finish my shopping and check out. You need to step away from me." He tried to move his cart forward to simply walk away from this situation, but the woman grabbed the front of his shopping cart with both hands, blocking his path completely. "You're not going anywhere until you admit you took my cart." The stock clerk had disappeared, hopefully to get help. Other shoppers had formed a loose semicircle around the scene, their phones out, recording. James could hear whispered conversations, people commenting on what they were witnessing. "This is crazy," someone murmured. "Should we do something?" another voice asked. James kept his hands on his cart, refusing to engage in a physical tug-of-war with this woman. "Let go of my cart, please. Make me," she taunted, her face contorted with rage. Just then, a woman in a store manager's vest came hurrying around the corner, the teenage stock clerk right behind her. The manager was a Hispanic woman in her late 30s, and James had seen her around the store before, though he didn't know her name. "What's going on here?" the manager asked, her voice professional but concerned. Both James and the angry woman started talking at once. "This man stole my shopping cart. This woman is harassing me and blocking my way." The manager held up her hands. Okay. One at a time, please. "Sir, why don't you tell me what happened?" James took a breath. "I've been shopping for about 25 minutes with this cart. I filled it with my groceries, working through my list. This woman approached me and claimed this cart was hers. But as you can see, it's full of items I've selected." The manager looked at the cart, seeing the produce, dairy items, and other groceries clearly chosen over time, not just grabbed in a moment. The angry woman jumped in before the manager could speak. "He's lying. I left my cart right here to grab something, and when I came back, he had taken it. He probably dumped out my groceries somewhere." "Ma'am, if you had groceries in a cart, where are they now?" the manager asked reasonably. "I don't know. He probably hid them. You people always stick together." The manager's expression shifted slightly. "Excuse me? What do you mean by that?" "You know exactly what I mean. You're probably going to take his side because... The woman was sputtering now, her anger making her incoherent. "Ma'am, I need you to calm down," the manager said firmly. "We can check the security footage to see exactly what happened, but right now, you need to lower your voice and step back." "Don't tell me to calm down," the woman screamed. "I want his name. I want to file a complaint. I want him arrested for theft." James felt exhaustion wash over him. He'd only wanted to buy some groceries. That's all. Just a simple shopping trip on a Tuesday morning. "Sir," the manager said gently to James, "I apologize for this. I can see these are clearly your groceries. Would you like to continue shopping, or would you prefer to check out now?"
"I can open a register for you right away." "Thank you," James said quietly.
"I just need a few more items, but maybe I should just go." "No," the angry woman shrieked. "He's not going anywhere." And then it happened. Fast and shocking. The woman reached out and shoved James, both hands against his chest, with surprising force. James, caught off guard and off balance, stumbled backward. His feet got tangled, and he fell hard against a display of stacked juice boxes, sending them tumbling across the floor. Pain shot through his hip and shoulder where he hit the ground. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. The sound of juice boxes hitting the floor echoed in the sudden silence. James lay there stunned, pain radiating through his body. "Oh my God," someone shouted. The manager immediately dropped to her knees beside James. "Sir, don't move. Are you hurt? Someone call 911. James could hear the woman's voice, different now, panicked. "I didn't mean to, I barely touched him, he's faking." But nobody was listening to her anymore. The other shoppers crowded closer, some calling emergency services, others offering help. The teenage stock clerk stood frozen, his face pale with shock. James tried to sit up, but the manager gently placed a hand on his shoulder. "Please, sir, stay still until the paramedics check you out." That was a hard fall. Through the pain and confusion, James could hear the woman still protesting, still making excuses, still refusing to take responsibility for what she'd done. And in that moment, lying on the cold grocery store floor surrounded by scattered juice boxes and concerned strangers, James Washington made a decision. This time, he wasn't going to just let it go. Two store employees helped James into a sitting position against the dairy case while they waited for the ambulance. His hip throbbed where he'd landed and his shoulder ached, but mostly he felt shaken. At 72, falls were no joke. He'd seen too many friends his age go downhill fast after a bad tumble. "Just breathe, sir," the manager said softly, kneeling beside him. Her name tag read Rita. She'd grabbed a folding chair from the break room and placed it nearby in case he wanted to try sitting in it. But for now, the floor felt safer. "I'm okay," James said, though his voice came out shakier than he'd intended. "Just give me a minute." Around them, the scene had transformed into controlled chaos. The assistant manager, a younger guy with a neat beard, was on the phone with the police. Several shoppers still had their phones out, and James could see them reviewing their footage, replaying the moment of the shove over and over. The woman who'd pushed him stood about 15 feet away, corralled by two stock clerks who'd been instructed by Rita to keep her there. She was still talking, her voice a mix of defensiveness and growing panic. "It was an accident. I barely touched him. He's obviously faking to get attention. This is ridiculous." A woman in yoga clothes who'd witnessed everything stepped forward. "Ma'am, we all saw what you did. You shoved him hard. I got the whole thing on video." "So did I," said an elderly man with a cane. "And I heard every nasty word you said before that, too." The angry woman's face cycled through several shades of red. "You're all ganging up on me. This is discrimination. I'm the victim here." Rita stood up and walked over to the woman, her voice firm. "Ma'am, you need to stop talking right now. The police are on their way, and I strongly suggest you wait quietly. I want to leave." "You can't keep me here?" The assistant manager spoke up. "Actually, ma'am, we can ask you to stay until the police arrive since an assault occurred on our property. If you try to leave, that's not going to look good for you." James watched this exchange from his spot on the floor. Part of him almost felt sorry for the woman. Almost. She dug herself into a hole and just kept digging deeper. But then he remembered the hatred in her eyes, the venom in her words, and that sympathy evaporated. A young woman approached James carefully, clutching her phone. "Sir, I'm so sorry this happened to you. I recorded the whole thing from when she first started yelling. If you need it for the police or anything, I can send it to you." "Me too," said another shopper, a man in a business suit. "I got it from a different angle. And I got the part where she used those slurs," added the woman in yoga clothes. "Every single word is clear on my video." James felt tears prick his eyes, but not from pain. It was the kindness of these strangers standing up for him, refusing to look away. In his younger years, people would have averted their eyes, pretended not to see, convinced themselves it wasn't their problem. But these people they saw, they cared, they were bearing witness. "Thank you," James said, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you all so much." Rita returned and crouched down beside him again. "Sir, can I get you some water?" "Are you in a lot of pain?" "Water would be nice," James admitted. "And I'm sore, but I don't think anything's broken. I've had worse." As Rita sent someone to get water, the sound of sirens grew closer. Within minutes, paramedics rushed in with their equipment and the scene shifted again. They began checking James's vital signs, asking him questions about where it hurt, whether he'd hit his head, if he felt dizzy or nauseous. Right behind the paramedics came two police officers, a man and a woman, both looking alert and professional. They took in the scene quickly, the elderly man on the floor being attended to, the agitated woman being watched by store employees, and the cluster of witnesses still holding their phones. The female officer approached Rita first. "I'm Officer Chen. Can you tell me what happened here?" Rita gave a clear, concise account of the situation. As she spoke, James noticed the male officer whose name tag read Officer Brooks, heading toward the angry woman. He could hear her immediately launching into her version of events. "Officer, thank God you're here. That man stole my shopping cart and then faked falling when I confronted him. These people are all lying because they're all in on it together." Officer Brooks held up a hand. "Ma'am, I need you to slow down. Let's start from the beginning." Meanwhile, Officer Chen was talking to the witnesses. One by one, they told her what they'd seen. She took notes carefully, and when they mentioned the videos, her eyebrows rose slightly. "You all recorded this?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," said the woman in yoga clothes. "Pretty much from every angle. And the audio is clear, too." Officer Chen walked over to James, who was now sitting in the folding chair the paramedics had helped him into. "Sir, I'm Officer Chen. Can you tell me in your own words what happened?" James took a sip of the water someone had brought him and began his account. He kept it simple and factual, no embellishment needed. He told her about his shopping trip, The woman's accusation about the cart, the escalating confrontation, and finally the shove. Did she say anything specific during the confrontation? Anything that stood out? Officer Chen asked. James hesitated. He'd spent a lifetime trying not to make waves, trying to be the bigger person, trying not to play what some people called the race card. But he was tired, so tired of swallowing these moments. She made it very clear she didn't think I belonged here, James said quietly. She used the phrase "you people" several times. She made references to our stores and our neighborhoods. I think the witnesses can tell you more specifically what she said. Officer Chen nodded, her expression neutral, but her eyes sympathetic. Thank you, sir. Did you sustain any injuries from the fall? Bruised hip, sore shoulder. The lead paramedic interjected. We're recommending he get checked out at the hospital, but he's refusing transport. I don't need a hospital, James said. I just want to give my statement and go home. Officer Chen glanced at the paramedics. Can you document his injuries? Photographs? Already done, the paramedic confirmed. Across the store, Officer Brooks was still talking to the woman whose voice kept rising and falling as she cycled through different emotions. Anger, indignation, fear, and back to anger. He was also talking to Rita and reviewing something on her computer, probably getting access to the security footage. The woman in yoga clothes approached Officer Chen. Excuse me, officer. I have the video if you want to see it. I think it'll clear up any confusion about what happened. Officer Chen took her information and asked her to send the video to the department's tip line. Several other witnesses did the same, eager to ensure their footage was part of the official record. After about 20 minutes of interviews and evidence gathering, Officer Brooks and Officer Chen conferred quietly near the customer service desk. James watched them glance at a laptop screen, presumably reviewing the security footage or the witness videos. Their expressions grew more serious. Officer Brooks approached the angry woman and his demeanor had shifted from questioning to official. Ma'am, I need you to turn around and place your hands behind your back. What? Why? The woman's voice went shrill. You're under arrest for assault. You have the right to remain silent. The Miranda rights echoed through the dairy section as Officer Brooks placed handcuffs on the woman. She was protesting loudly, demanding to speak to a lawyer, insisting this was all a mistake, claiming she was being persecuted. Several shoppers captured this moment on video too. James watched from his chair, feeling a strange mix of vindication and sadness. He'd never wanted this. He'd just wanted to buy his groceries. As Officer Brooks led the woman toward the exit, she turned and looked at James. For just a second, their eyes met. He saw fear there now, real fear, the recognition that her actions had consequences, but he saw no remorse, no understanding of why she was really being arrested. Officer Chen came back to James. Sir, we're going to need you to come to the station to give a formal statement when you're feeling up to it. Given the nature of this incident and the evidence we've collected, the district attorney's office will likely want to pursue additional charges beyond simple assault. What kind of charges? James asked. Officer Chen chose her words carefully. Given the documented verbal statements made during the confrontation, they may pursue hate crime enhancements. But that'll be up to the DA. James nodded slowly. A hate crime. There it was, named and official. Part of him had always tried to rationalize these encounters, to give people the benefit of the doubt. But not today. Today, the truth would be called exactly what it was. Rita knelt down beside his chair one more time. Mr. Washington, your groceries are on us today. Everything, and I want you to know you're always welcome in this store. Always. James felt those tears threaten again. Thank you, Rita. That means more than you know. As the store slowly returned to normal, as the crowd dispersed and employees began cleaning up the scattered juice boxes, James sat in his folding chair and realized something important. This wasn't over, not by a long shot, but for the first time in 72 years, he felt like maybe, just maybe, justice might actually be served. By that evening, James Washington's quiet Tuesday morning had become the talk of the entire town. The videos from the grocery store had started appearing on social media within an hour of the incident. By dinner time, they'd been shared thousands of times. James sat in his living room, his hip elevated on a pillow, ice pack wrapped in a towel resting on his shoulder. His grandson Timothy had driven over immediately after hearing what happened. refusing to leave his grandfather alone. Now the young man sat on the couch, scrolling through his phone, his face growing darker with each passing minute. "Grandpa, this is everywhere," Timothy said, shaking his head. "Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. People are furious. There's already a hashtag trending." James sighed. He'd lived through the civil rights era, had marched in protests, had seen how movements could build. But this new digital age where everything spread at lightning speed still amazed him. "What are people saying?" James asked, though part of him wasn't sure he wanted to know. Timothy read from his phone. "Most people are supportive of you. They're calling for justice, saying this kind of behavior can't be tolerated anymore. But there are some people defending her, saying everyone's overreacting, that we don't know the full story." "There are always those people," James said quietly. "Some folks will twist themselves into pretzels trying to justify the unjustifiable." The local news station had already called 3 times, asking for an interview. James had politely declined each time. He wasn't ready for that kind of attention. He just wanted his hip to stop aching. But the next morning he woke up to find news trucks parked outside his modest home. Reporters were stationed on the sidewalk, careful not to trespass on his property, but clearly waiting for him to emerge. Timothy peeked through the curtains. "This is wild, Grandpa. There must be 5 different news stations out there." James made his way to the window, moving slowly due to his soreness. Sure enough, reporters with microphones stood ready, cameras pointed at his front door. He let the curtain fall back. "I suppose I can't hide forever," he said. "You don't have to talk to them if you don't want to," Timothy assured him. "We can just wait them out." But James thought about it. He thought about all the times he'd stayed quiet, all the times he'd let things slide to avoid making a scene. Maybe it was time to speak up. Not for revenge, but so people would understand. So maybe the next person wouldn't have to go through this. "Hand me the phone," James said. "I'll talk to one of them." Just one. He chose the local station, the one he'd been watching for 20 years. A young reporter named Lisa Chen, no relation to the officer, arrived within 30 minutes. She was professional and respectful, setting up in James's living room while her cameraman adjusted the lighting. "Mr. Washington, thank you for agreeing to speak with us," Lisa began once they were recording. "Can you walk us through what happened yesterday at Riverside Grocery?" James told his story calmly, the same way he'd told it to the police. He didn't exaggerate, didn't embellish. He simply told the truth. When he got to the part about the woman's words, about the "you people" comments and the implications about not belonging, his voice remained steady, but his eyes grew distant. "Mr. Washington, this incident has sparked a huge conversation online and in the community. What do you want people to understand about what happened?" James paused, choosing his words carefully. "I want people to understand that this isn't new. This has been happening my whole life. I'm 72 years old and I've been dealing with moments like this since I was a child. What's different now is that people are paying attention. People are recording it. People are speaking up. And that gives me hope. Do you have anything you'd like to say to the woman who pushed you?" James was quiet for a long moment. "I hope she gets help. I hope she learns. I hope she realizes that the hate she's carrying around is poisoning her from the inside. But more than that, I hope this serves as a wake-up call to others who might think this kind of behavior is acceptable. It's not. It never was." The interview aired that evening and was picked up by national networks by the next morning. James's dignified response, his lack of anger or vindictiveness, resonated with people across the country. His words about hope, about change, about speaking up, they struck a chord. Meanwhile, the district attorney's office was moving forward with the case. The prosecutor assigned to it, a sharp woman named Patricia Thornton, had reviewed all the evidence, the security footage, the witness videos, the written statements, the photographs of James's injuries. She called James 3 days after the incident. "Mr. Washington, I want you to know we're taking this very seriously. Based on the evidence, we're moving forward with charges of assault, disorderly conduct, and we're adding a hate crime enhancement." "What does that mean exactly?" James asked. "It means we're acknowledging that this attack was motivated by racial bias. The statements she made before and during the assault, all captured on video, make her intent very clear. If convicted, the hate crime enhancement carries additional penalties." James absorbed this information. "I just want justice, Ms. Thornton, not revenge. Just justice." "That's exactly what we're going to pursue," she assured him. The story continued to grow. The woman's employer, a local insurance company, released a statement saying they'd terminated her employment effective immediately after reviewing the videos. They condemned her actions and stated that such behavior didn't reflect their company values. This sparked another wave of online discussion. Some praised the company for taking a stand. Others argued that she shouldn't lose her job over one incident, that everyone deserved a second chance. The debates raged across social media platforms, in coffee shops, at dinner tables across the country. 4 days after the incident, something unexpected happened. The community organized a rally at Riverside Grocery in support of James. He hadn't asked for it, hadn't even known about it until Timothy showed him the event page online. "Grandpa, they're expecting hundreds of people," Timothy said, excitement in his voice. "They want to show solidarity with you, to send a message that hate has no place in this community." James wasn't sure how he felt about being the center of so much attention, but he agreed to attend. On Saturday morning, he and Timothy drove to the grocery store to find the parking lot packed with people holding signs. "Justice for Mr. Washington," one sign read. "We stand against hate," declared another. "Racism has no place here," said a third. People of all ages and backgrounds had shown up. Young families with children, elderly couples, teenagers, business owners still in their work clothes. The diversity of the crowd moved James deeply. Rita, the store manager, had set up a microphone near the entrance. When James arrived, the crowd erupted in applause. He felt overwhelmed, tears streaming down his face as strangers cheered for him, showed him support, told him he mattered. Rita handed him the microphone. James hadn't prepared anything to say, but the words came anyway. "I'm just an old man who wanted to buy groceries," he began, his voice shaking slightly. "I never expected to be standing here like this, but I'm grateful. I'm grateful for every person who recorded what happened. I'm grateful for every witness who spoke up. I'm grateful for this community showing that love is stronger than hate." He paused, looking out at the sea of faces. "What happened to me isn't special. It happens every day to people all over this country. The difference is this time people paid attention. This time people cared. And that gives me hope that maybe, just maybe, we're finally moving in the right direction." The crowd cheered again. People came up to shake his hand, to hug him, to thank him for his grace and dignity. A woman about his age approached with tears in her eyes. "My father dealt with things like this his whole life," she told James. "He passed away 10 years ago. I wish he could have lived to see this day, to see people actually standing up and saying enough is enough. Thank you for being brave." "I'm not brave," James said softly. "I'm just tired of staying quiet." Local news stations covered the rally extensively. The footage of James's speech, of the diverse crowd standing together, of signs proclaiming unity and justice, spread just as quickly as the original incident videos had. But not everyone was supportive. James started receiving phone calls, most of which he didn't answer. The ones he did answer ranged from supportive to hostile. Someone left a nasty note in his mailbox. Timothy wanted to report it to the police, but James said no. He wouldn't let fear dictate his life. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks after the incident. During that time, more information came out about the woman who'd attacked him. Her name was Jennifer Mitchell, and this apparently wasn't her first incident. Several people came forward with stories of her aggressive behavior, her verbal outbursts, her pattern of entitlement and anger. A former coworker told reporters that Jennifer had been reported to HR multiple times for making inappropriate comments, but had always managed to keep her job until now. A neighbor described an incident where Jennifer had called the police on a black family having a barbecue in the park, claiming they were being too loud even though it was the middle of the afternoon. The pattern was clear. This wasn't just one bad day. This was who Jennifer Mitchell was, revealed finally and completely in that grocery store dairy aisle. As the hearing date approached, James found himself thinking not just about justice for himself, but about all the other people Jennifer had likely harmed over the years. All the people who'd stayed quiet, who hadn't had witnesses with cameras, who just tried to get through their day and move on. This case had become bigger than him. It had become about accountability, about consequences, about saying clearly and loudly that this behavior would not be tolerated anymore. James Washington was ready to see it through to the end. The courthouse felt intimidating to James, even though he'd been inside many times over the years for jury duty. But today was different. Today he was at the center of it all. Timothy walked beside him, one hand gently supporting his grandfather's elbow as they climbed the stone steps. Media crews lined the walkway, cameras rolling, reporters calling out questions. James kept his eyes forward, his expression calm. He'd learned over the past 3 weeks that sometimes silence spoke louder than words. Inside, the hallway outside the courtroom was packed. James recognized faces from the rally, witnesses from the grocery store, and community members who'd simply shown up to demonstrate their support. The woman in yoga clothes who'd recorded the video gave him an encouraging nod. The elderly man with the cane raised his hand in a small wave. "Ready, Grandpa?" Timothy asked softly. "As ready as I'll ever be," James replied. The courtroom itself was surprisingly full for what was technically still a preliminary hearing. Prosecutor Patricia Thornton sat at one table, her files neatly organized in front of her. At the defense table sat Jennifer Mitchell with her attorney, a middle-aged man in an expensive suit who'd been making statements to the press about how his client was the real victim in all of this. Jennifer looked different than she had that day in the grocery store. Her hair was pulled back neatly, and she wore a conservative dress. Her lawyer had clearly coached her on appearance. But when her eyes briefly met James's across the courtroom, he saw that same flash of anger, quickly suppressed but unmistakable. Judge Raymond Carter entered, and everyone rose. He was a black man in his 60s with an air of quiet authority. James had read that Judge Carter had a reputation for being fair but firm, with no tolerance for nonsense in his courtroom. "Please be seated," Judge Carter said. "We're here today for the preliminary hearing in the case of the state versus Jennifer Mitchell. The charges are assault in the 3rd degree, disorderly conduct, and assault with a hate crime enhancement. Ms. Thornton, you may proceed." Patricia Thornton stood, and over the next 90 minutes she methodically presented the evidence. The security footage played on screens throughout the courtroom, showing James shopping peacefully. Then Jennifer's approach, the confrontation, and finally the shove that sent James tumbling into the display. But it was the witness videos that hit hardest. With crystal clear audio, the courtroom heard every word Jennifer had said. "You people, our stores, our neighborhoods." The racial animus was undeniable, captured from multiple angles by multiple witnesses. Jennifer's lawyer tried to object several times, arguing that his client's words were being taken out of context, that she was simply having a bad day and her language was unfortunate but not criminal. Judge Carter listened patiently, then said, "Counselor, I've now heard the phrase 'you people' approximately 17 times in these videos, always delivered with clear hostility, and always in the context of telling Mr. Washington he didn't belong in that store. I'm having a hard time imagining what context would make that acceptable." The defense attorney shifted uncomfortably but pressed on. "Your Honor, my client is a hard-working mother of 2 who made a mistake in the heat of the moment. She's never been in trouble before. This has already cost her her job, her reputation, everything. Surely that's punishment enough." Patricia Thornton rose immediately. "Your Honor, the defense's characterization isn't quite accurate. We've received statements from multiple individuals documenting a pattern of similar behavior by Ms. Mitchell. A former colleague reported racist comments in the workplace. A neighbor described Ms. Mitchell calling the police on a black family for simply having a cookout. This wasn't one bad moment. This was a pattern of behavior that finally got recorded." Judge Carter reviewed the additional statements that had been filed. His expression remained neutral, but James thought he saw something flicker in the judge's eyes. Recognition, perhaps. The understanding that comes from lived experience. "Ms. Mitchell," Judge Carter said, "I'm going to give you an opportunity to address the court. You don't have to say anything, but if you'd like to, now is the time." Jennifer's lawyer leaned over and whispered urgently to her. She shook her head, clearly wanting to speak despite his advice. She stood up, her hands gripping the table. "Your Honor, I'm not a racist," she began, her voice shaking. "I was having a terrible day. I'd just gotten bad news about my mother's health. I was stressed and I wasn't thinking clearly. I shouldn't have pushed him, I admit that. But all of this, the hate crime charges, losing my job, having my face all over the internet, it's not fair. I'm the one being persecuted now." James listened to her words and heard no real remorse, only self-pity, only concern for how this had affected her life, with no acknowledgement of the fear and pain she'd caused him. Judge Carter was silent for a long moment. Then he said, Ms. Mitchell, I'm going to tell you something I learned a long time ago. When you're having a bad day, when you're stressed, when you're not thinking clearly, what comes out is who you really are. Those words you used, that contempt you showed, it didn't appear out of nowhere. It was already inside you. Jennifer sat down abruptly, her face pale. However, the judge continued, that's not for me to decide today. Today, I'm simply determining whether there's sufficient evidence to move forward to trial. And I can tell you without hesitation, there is more than sufficient evidence. This case will proceed. He set a trial date for 6 weeks out, denied the defense's motion to dismiss the hate crime enhancement, and set bail conditions requiring Jennifer to stay away from James and from Riverside Grocery. As people filed out of the courtroom, James felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to find Patricia Thornton smiling at him. That went as well as we could have hoped, she said. The evidence is solid. I'm confident we'll get a conviction. What happens next? James asked. There's a chance they'll try to negotiate a plea deal now that they see how strong our case is. But if they don't, we go to trial. Either way, there will be consequences for what she did to you. The trial ended up not being necessary. 2 weeks later, Jennifer's lawyer called Patricia with a plea offer. Jennifer would plead guilty to all charges in exchange for the prosecution's recommendation on sentencing. When James heard this, he asked what that meant. Patricia explained, it means we can recommend what we think is an appropriate sentence, but ultimately it's up to Judge Carter. What would you like to see happen? James thought about it carefully. I don't want her life destroyed, he said finally. But I want her to understand what she did. I want her to face real consequences. And I want her to get help so maybe she doesn't hurt someone else. The sentencing hearing was quieter than the preliminary hearing had been. Less media, fewer spectators, but still the community showed up. Jennifer stood before Judge Carter and formally pleaded guilty to assault with a hate crime enhancement and disorderly conduct. Judge Carter looked at her for a long time before speaking. Ms. Mitchell, what you did that day at the grocery store was assault. But it was also an act of hatred, an attempt to make another human being feel less than, to make him feel like he didn't belong in his own community. Mr. Washington is 72 years old. He's lived through the civil rights era, through decades of struggle for basic dignity and respect. And you, in that grocery store, tried to take that dignity away from him. He paused, letting the words sink in. You're fortunate that Mr. Washington is a man of great character. He could have asked for the maximum penalty. Instead, he's asked for something more meaningful. Justice with purpose. Judge Carter delivered his sentence, a fine of $5,000 to be paid to a local civil rights organization, 200 hours of community service, to be completed at the county's Diversity and Inclusion Center, and at a senior center serving predominantly minority communities. Mandatory participation in anger management counseling and an extended racial sensitivity and bias training program. 2 years of probation, during which any similar incident would result in immediate jail time. I want to be very clear, Ms. Mitchell, Judge Carter said. This is not about punishing you for who you are. This is about holding you accountable for what you did and giving you the opportunity to become better. I suggest you take that opportunity seriously. Jennifer nodded, tears streaming down her face. Whether they were tears of genuine remorse or just fear of consequences, James couldn't say. When it was over, James gave a brief statement outside the courthouse. I'm satisfied with the outcome, he told the gathered reporters. This was never about revenge. It was about accountability. It was about saying clearly that this behavior has consequences, and it was about hoping that maybe, just maybe, this will help her change. 6 months later, James returned to Riverside Grocery for his regular Tuesday shopping trip. Rita greeted him with a warm smile. The store had implemented new training programs for all employees on handling discrimination and bias incidents. They'd also created a community board where customers could share positive stories and messages of unity. James filled his cart methodically, working through his list. Several customers recognized him and greeted him warmly. A young black couple with a toddler approached him near the cereal aisle. Mr. Washington, the father said, we just wanted to thank you for speaking up, for seeing it through. Our daughter's going to grow up in a world that's a little bit better because of what you did. James looked at the little girl, no more than 3 years old, grinning up at him with bright eyes. He thought about all the years he'd stayed quiet, all the times he'd let things go. and he thought about how one moment of standing up had rippled outward in ways he never could have imagined. "You're welcome," he said softly, "but don't thank me alone. Thank everyone who spoke up that day. Thank the people who recorded what happened. Thank the community that stood together. That's what made the difference." As James pushed his cart toward the checkout, past the very dairy aisle where it had all happened, he felt something he hadn't expected. Peace. Not because the world had suddenly become perfect, but because for once justice had been served. Because for once hatred had faced consequences. Because for once an ordinary man's dignity had been defended by an extraordinary community. He loaded his groceries onto the belt, chatted with Miguel at the register, and walked out into the sunshine carrying his bags. Just an old man who'd gone to buy groceries and ended up reminding everyone that standing up for what's right still matters. And that, James thought as he drove home, was enough.